Stephen, can you hear us?
Sure, if that's any better. Hey, can you hear me at all? Heather and
Hear you.
company?
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the November 4, 2024 meeting of the Meridian Transportation Commission. It is 3:30 in the afternoon. We'll start with the roll call. Mr. Ballard had informed us that he would not be in attendance today. Mr. Shoemaker.
Here.
Mr. Lancaster.
Present, Mr. Chairman.
I am present, of course. Mr. Hopkins.
Present.
Mr. Lewis
Here.
is online. Mr. Smith
Here.
is online. Mr. Leclerc.
Present.
Okay, Mr. Wasson, ex officio.
Present.
Ms. Klopfenstein.
Present.
Ms. Carson. Ms. Taysom.
Present.
Okay, Mr. Price.
Here.
Sergeant Smith.
Here.
Welcome. Ms. Murray.
I'm here attending online.
Thank you, ma'am. Heather Hill is here and Mr. Hood is absent, either with himself or a family member not feeling well. I did not skip a member because I saved Lily Miller to last. Lily Miller is our new school representative. This is her first meeting. And Mr. Lancaster, I have a question for you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Has the commission ever had a female member?
Yes. Mr. Commissioner Hopkins says yes. I think that sounds right also.
Time she didn't last forever.
Yeah.
Okay, you're the only one that remembers because the mayor doesn't.
He did.
May have been the previous mayor. Okay. At any rate, Lily Miller is joining us today. She'll be with us for the next year. Welcome. And if you'll take a moment or two to tell us about yourself, what school you go to, what grade you're in, where you plan to go to college if you do, or anything at all you'd like to say.
I'm a senior going to Gen Prep Charter. I'm in 12th grade, so I'll be graduating this year. I'm going to Arizona to pursue golf at Grand Canyon, so very excited for the warmer weather. I do debate and speech, so yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, well, again, welcome. We're very glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
Okay,
Mr.
the next
Chairman.
item,
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lancaster,
may I add to your welcome?
you may.
All right. So Commissioner Miller, welcome aboard. So we've had wonderful younger commissioners over the years, and I'm sure you'll be one of those. So we are, us old guys might be scary, but we don't bite too much. So don't be shy and jump in. So if you do speech and debate, then you'll be perfect for this group.
Thank you, sir. First item is the adoption of the agenda. Does staff have any changes?
No changes, sir.
Okay, anyone else have any changes to the agenda as published? Hearing none, Chair will accept a Motion and a second.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Lancaster, Mr. Hopkins, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Agenda is adopted. Next item is the approval of the minutes of October the 7th. Chair would entertain a motion and a second or comments regarding the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the October meeting minutes.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Lancaster, followed by Mr. Hopkins again. Anyone else have any comments, questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. We move from there to old business action items. Transportation project updates. Ms. Hill, welcome back to town.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair and Commission. So for transportation updates this month, these begin on page 6 on your packet. I don't have a lot of updates for the ACHD projects. There are a few bolded. The new addition for this month is that we did receive several project updates from ITD. So those are reflected in your packet. So we got those in October. The last update was in, I believe it was April. So there's several new updates there from ITD staff. And I believe if there's anybody has any questions, Justin's online, but not to put him on the spot, but there's several there for your reference.
Mr. Chair.
You heard of Mr. Chair, who was it? I didn't, Mr. Sorry.
Heather, I'm curious, what's the holdup with the Amity Road Locust Grove intersection? Do you know?
Let me take a look here. Are you referring to Amity and Locust Grove, Meridian to Locust Grove, the first one here?
Yes.
I don't know the answer to that. The only update we have is that it's on an indefinite pause pending direction from ACHD Commission. So as far as that, I can see if there's any other information, but that's the most recent update we have. And I can check with Brian as well following, since he's the staff contact, but that one's kind of in a hiatus.
That's a mess. I'm sure the city of Meridian's hearing about that
Yeah,
regularly.
and as we're going through this meeting, I can check my inbox too, because I kind of have to stash away all the emails we get for each project and see if there's any updates, but I haven't received anything formal.
Thank you.
One that's in here, I'm sure I hadn't picked it out right now, but one is on November the 11th, I believe, Mr. Watson, the Houstic from 10 Mile to Black Cat work is going to begin. It's coming up pretty quick here. So we're going to start seeing some changes in routing of traffic up in that part of town. Mr. Miller, one thing I'll point out to you, and you can do this certainly however you wish to. You may want to read all of these just to get a feel for them. And then each month, any updates are put in bold lettering to save you having to read every word of them again, unless you just really want to. So a little piece of information there. Okay, hearing nothing else on transportation project updates, and I'm glad you could get something out of ITD. Next is an item that we've seen a time or two, and I believe that Mr. Watson may be prepared to talk about this, the Corporate Drive and South Progress Avenue intersection.
Mr. Chair, John Wasson, ACHD. We did an investigation based upon a request from Dave Miles, I believe out of the mayor's office, in June of this year. And what we found was there's no problem. Visibility is appropriate. You had to have 280 feet of visibility. Visibility was adequate. However, it's also advised that drivers pull up just past the stop bar at the stop sign to get a little bit better sight distance, but There is no issue with that, and we did do an investigation, like I said, based upon a request from the mayor's office.
Any questions from Mr. Watson? Hearing none, Ms. Hill will, I presume someone will communicate back to the original commenter,
I can do that.
whether you do or Mr. Watson. Just, I do like to have those people know that we at least, however long it took, talked about it. Thank you. Okay, the next item, again from Mr. Watson, I believe, Tree Farm Way and Chinden Boulevard, better known as Rock Harbor Church, I think.
We don't have, Mr. Chair, John Wasson, ACHD, we don't have any fixes for that, and I have not yet heard back from the church as to whether they desire to meet or not.
Mr. Price, anything from ITD?
From what I recall from last month, that was our next step, was seeing if the church wanted to meet, and then from there, if they did, try to figure out what regular events they had, so then we could put in some type of, or we could look at putting in a new signal timing plan for those certain events. But if they're not responsive to meeting, then I don't know that there's much we can do. I did add it to our list of a location to go and observe those right turn movements, to look at possibly changing something there. But when I asked, I couldn't find that there was anything regular there, but that is something still on my list to look at. But the main thing is trying to meet with the church, because they would have a better idea as to what issues are happening.
So am I to understand that the church has been reached out to but has not responded? Is that what I heard?
Mr. Chair, John Wasson, ACHD, I reached out to the church and I haven't heard back. I left a voicemail because their office is not always available.
And Ms. Hill, did I hear something similar from the mayor's office?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I can follow up with the mayor's office to see if they've heard any or received any contact, but last we met with them, they weren't able to get in touch with anybody either.
Any members have questions or comments? Okay, thank you. Next item is new business, ex officio updates. We will start with, I'm going to work this backwards a little bit. Sergeant Smith, do you have anything for us?
Mr. Chair, Sergeant Smith, Meridian Police. Nothing new, just still lots and lots of crashes. We've seen quite an uptick in the last couple of months. Not sure why, but nothing really new with it.
Mr. Price, anything to add from ITD?
Thank you. Only the updates, so we have updates to the projects that we're working on. If there's questions on those, let me know and I'll get answers for those questions. But aside from that, I don't have anything additional today.
I'm pretty sure it's Wednesday evening that there's an ITD open house at Gym Prep on McDermott regarding Highway 16 progress. If any of you are interested in going to one of those, you may want to check the ITD website and confirm the date and time. Ms. Taysom, anything from VRT?
Nothing significant to report, but I did want to let the folks know that we are going to be meeting with the city of Kuna next week to continue on our discussions from the Kuna transit study we began a few years ago, and we'll be discussing with them what transit to Kuna might look like.
Has Ms. Carson joined us?
Yes.
Welcome.
Hello.
I have a question for you before you even start.
Okay.
What are the four quote-unquote Greyhound-like buses parked over here on Cherry Lane by the school?
That is a great question. You can plug my hiring. So we have a significant driver shortage across the country, really, but we have a driver shortage at West Data as well. And what that looks like for middle school and high school sports is that we occasionally have to go outside of our normal contract with Durham School Services to have another company called Mustang Services drive some of those routes. We had to get a waiver from the State Department of Education to be able to do that because we need more drivers.
Okay, and what, do you have anything else for us?
Yeah, so we are gearing up for ACHD's request for integrated 5-year work plan. So I'm sure we'll be partnering with the city at some point during the process to look at projects together and reaching out to the schools and community to see what projects we want. And then we also are collecting data this year for the first time ever on which students are walking to school. So we're excited to see how we can incorporate that into our request process to be able to say confidently how many students walk through the areas that we're requesting improvements to.
And
That's all I have.
one of those is going to have to help me here. On Linder, south of Overland, we had a request for a ped crossing there at, was it Americana? And that, if I remember, turned into a school ACHD combination question. Is that correct?
That is, it's a lot of back and forth, and I don't know if an answer was ever finalized on whether that had been funded previously by some mechanism, but as far as I know, it's still just pending ACHD determining that it's warranted at that location.
Mr. Chair, John Wasson, Ada County Highway District. I believe it's actually at American Falls,
Correct. I'm sorry.
and I will have to follow up on that one.
I would appreciate it since it was on our radar quite a few months ago. Like, get these things concluded, either no problem or working on it, or we fix it, one of the three. Ms. Kloffenstein, you're up.
All right. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Leila Kloffenstein with Compass. Not a lot of updates for you either this month. Just 2 public open comment periods that we have open. One more for the staff folks on the call, but our phase 1 applications are open, so that allows Compass to go for discretionary or competitive grant funding opportunities, as well as prioritize projects for formula funding, federal formula funding. So get those applications in. This is call 1. We'll have another call in the spring. And then one other thing to note is that we have public comment open until the 11th of November on 6 new projects that are included in the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or the TIP, which is a 7-year budget of transportation projects that are occurring across the 2-county region.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Wasson, anything else of note out there?
John Wasson, ACHD. We've been working on an awful lot of speed studies, and I've been sending some of the ones that are Meridians over to Sergeant Smith. And we are currently working on reevaluating the traffic calming program for ACHD, and I believe that's going to be discussed here shortly.
I believe you're correct. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Hey. Yes, sir.
I have a question or two.
Please.
So Sergeant Smith, if I may ask of you, so you mentioned an uptick in crashes. I think anyone that's driven around town in the last few months has noticed an uptick in traffic, right? It seems noticeable, right? Where streets and intersections may have been near capacity, they seem to be at or over now, which adds to congestion quite a bit. Anyway, I ask, so you mentioned uptick in crashes. So are you seeing different kinds of crashes or just an increase in the usual kind of crashes you see?
No, they're all the same type thing, falling too close and inattention. There's just more of it. When school is in session, we get exponentially more crashes, and it will do this until summer. So, yeah, not sure.
Lots of rear end crashes, basically.
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah. Okay. If you had to guess, and I'm just putting you on the spot here, but if you had to guess, would you say, crashes per vehicles or drivers is increasing, or is it still kind of the same? If you don't know, that's okay too.
I guess I don't quite understand your question.
Yeah, so if there's more vehicles, then it kind of makes sense that there's more crashes, right? But is the increase in crashes bigger than the increase in vehicles? Did that make more sense?
I guess I wouldn't have any way of knowing if traffic is increased or not. I don't have volume numbers on anything, like that, so I wouldn't know how to compare that.
Okay, no, that's fine. I just was curious. You've got, the beat on the street better than any of us, so. Thank you.
Anything else from commissioners on ex officio comments? Okay, thank you all. Ms. Hill, staff communications.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So for staff communications, we have a lot less this month than last. So we have 3 total just correspondences received. These start on page 13 of your packet. And I would propose, similar to last month, that we just go through each one by one, starting with the first on page 13, if the chair wishes to do so. And I'm not sure, I did chat with John Watson earlier this morning, and it sounded like he may have some information on some of these as well, so.
And can someone help me, the first correspondence item talks about U-stick between Meridian and Linder, and apparently at Venable. We've heard this before, haven't we? Didn't this come up? One, yeah, well, it wasn't just a ped crossing. No, that's number 3, I think you're thinking about.
No, this one, I lived right there. We talked about pedestrian crossing, someone else wanted to pick up toward Venable. We discussed that they were down close to the park. That's what we talked about.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
Sergeant Smith.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
So also last year, I believe Mr. Watson got some requests to evaluate cut-through traffic from Ashton to Venable out to U-Stick. So we did have some conversations about that last year.
Thank you. I'm not crazy. I thought I remembered something. Just didn't remember what. Mr. Watson, any thoughts at all on that one? Put you on the spot.
Mr. Chair, John Wasson, many thoughts.
Would you like to share?
Sure. Venable and Ustick does meet the warrant for signalization. It has been sent over to planning. And And at this point, planning has to determine where in the matrix it's going to be. I don't know the answer to this next question, but has a city made this a priority back to ACHD? If they do, it's likely that it would move it up on the prioritization list for a signal. With regards to a speed feedback sign, I would not recommend it, and my leadership would probably not want to install one. Speed feedback signs work really well on 2 and 3 lane roads. They have a real difficult time picking up the far lane or 4 or 5 lane roads. So we would not be getting good information back to the driver. And we can evaluate for additional speed limit signs, but no, I'm sorry, I'm not installing a 300 by 200 foot speed limit sign because somebody can't see it. It's unfortunate, but we have standard speed limit signs based upon the speed limit for the street, and that's well documented in the MUTCD. And we tend to follow it because nobody in the neighborhood wants a 48-inch speed limit sign right next to their house. And nobody on a U-stick wants a 12-inch speed limit sign on U-stick that they can't see. So we gauge those based upon the speed limit and the classification of the street. If we're lacking a speed limit sign and police are telling us that they're having a hard time enforcing it, sure, we can absolutely look at it, but I can guarantee you, more speed limit signs do not equal better compliance by drivers.
You're the professional. I'm not going to disagree with you. Ms. Hill, do we want to put this down for the future review of the priority list that's going to be coming up next, whenever that comes up again?
Yeah, I can add it to the list for projects to consider because over the course of the year, there's been several that have come up that we may need to rank. And I think as Miranda had mentioned, we'll be kind of working together also to identify projects, and we'll also be meeting with ACHD on how to maybe do things a little different next year. So this can go on there and see how we can shift things around.
Maybe put it on there with a question mark and refer to this and whatever the previous question we got about the area, and let our subcommittee work on it. See what they come up with.
Mr. Chairman
Yes, sir.
and Ms. Hill, Joshua Iverson has offered to give you a task generously in this letter. He says that he wants Dana to talk with you before submitting a traffic investigation report. Is that happened? Is that going to happen?
If I've followed up with the citizen?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you wanted to wait.
There-
We talked about it today, but.
Yeah, I mean, I did follow up and let them know that I'd be presenting it here and I'd be coordinating with ACHD as well, and that I'd follow up. But that correspondence was like after I think this took place. So there's some emails that go back and forth where nothing has come of it to include in here.
Oh,
So, but I'm in contact with Dana.
Dana. As far as we know, has she submitted a report, a request or anything?
That I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Wasson, you may not know either, but if you could check and see if she's submitted one of these traffic investigation reports online that Mr. Iverson asked her to do. Maybe that's something that can be worked off of later.
Okay.
Kind of up to the citizen to do that, I think. But and I don't know if we want to try to iron that out. It seemed awkward to me that he's saying, talk to Heather before you take your action. I guess it's helpful, but anyway, that's just a thought. And so Yes, that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Lancaster,
if I may.
you may.
So I have a question for Sergeant Smith again. So this goes back to the crashes. Do you know offhand, Sergeant Smith, what kind of crash responses you're having on this particular section of road in question? So U-stick between Linder and Meridian.
So I'm glad you asked that because I pulled it specifically for U-stick in Venable because that's her complaint was people being able to turn left out onto U-stick. So in the last 14-month period, we've only had 3 crashes there.
Okay, and is that, you mentioned an uptick in crashes previously. Or, is this, I guess based on your comments, I'm taking this as, this isn't a location where you're seeing a dramatic increase all of a sudden. Am I
No.
reading that too much? Okay.
Yeah, no, not at all. That's actually very insignificant to us. We have one intersection where we're at 172 crashes and counting. So, I mean, 3 is really nothing in over a year.
Yeah, this isn't one that you're going to every day. Yeah, got it.
Correct. Yeah. And in terms of speed enforcement, I actually had to pull those numbers for another citizen that was inquiring about U-stick specifically in speed enforcement. So we're out there patrolling those routinely. All of the main arterials we're traveling consistently. From the U-stick corridor, which would be Eagle to McDermott, which most that's going to be concentrated in the busier parts of town. We've written 293 citations or warnings for speed in the last year. So we are out there. We are making speed stops. We are citing for those. Citizens just don't see us during their snapshot of time that they travel through, so they think we're not out there.
For the record, I like seeing you at these meetings more than I like seeing you on the side of the road. So let's keep it that way. Mr. Chairman, if I can ask Mr. Wasson a couple questions.
Sir, please.
Mr. Wasson, so I should have followed up with this during your ex officio report, but you mentioned several or been doing lots of speed studies. Have any of those been on this section of U-stick by chance?
Commissioner Lancaster, Mr. Chair, no.
Okay.
Now, the reason for that is I'm never going to install traffic calming on U-stick Road. Again, ain't no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It just carries too much traffic and it's posted higher than the limit that I'm allowed, and it's an arterial road. So traffic calming for arterials really doesn't get a lot of going unless you're Rose Hill right now. And we're looking at traffic calming, some on Rose Hill. But on a street like U-stick, I think, and please, Sergeant Smith, chime in here, but the peak hour really isn't the major problem because the volumes in the peak hour, along with the traffic signals, pretty well control the speeds that people are able to travel directionally on U-stick. It's those off-peak hours that provide Sergeant Smith with all of her business.
So another question, Mr. Wasson, and this is going to nerd out just a little bit, I'll admit. So I guess as a preface, not for you, Mr. Wasson, but for everyone else, except for Mr. Lewis, perhaps. So when we talk about a signal being warranted, there's 8 or 9 warrants that criterion, and if they're met, then you could say a signal could be built at this location. And if they're not met, you're not supposed to. So offhand, do you remember which warrant or warrants it meets?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Lancaster, I do not, because I'm not the signal warrant guy. I'm the traffic calming warrant guy, and I know those warrants correct, 100%. But you are right. There are 9 warrants, 8 hours, 2 hour, 4 hour type stuff. But again, just like stop signs, traffic signals are not installed to control speeds on any road. They're out there to control right of way and access onto that roadway.
All right, and then I think this is the last one, Mr. Chairman, but
Well, I will not hold you to it.
yeah, I appreciate that. Not promising anything either. Yeah. So what, Mr. Wasson, is it ACHD's practice or policy when you have an intersection like this that's on the priority list, on the 5-year work plan, if it meets a signal warrant, does ACHD default to signal or a roundabout or some sort of treatment like that? Or do you, what am I trying to say? So does the warrant lead you to a signal, or do you look for other alternatives first?
Commissioner Lancaster, Mr. Chair, we always look at all of the options, whether we want to, and I'm not saying we would ever, but always stop at a location, a roundabout, or a full-blown signal. And once we start looking down that rabbit hole, then we look at, do we look at 1-lane, 2-lane roundabouts? Do we look at the through with no lefts at an intersection like we have on VMP and State? So we look at a lot of different things, but in all intersections, we are going to look at the potential for roundabout versus traffic signal.
Okay, thank you. So just a little commentary, Mr. Chairman. So
Yes, sir.
yeah, just because a signal is warranted doesn't mean that it has to be installed or even should. For instance, the agency that Mr. Price works for, there's lots of times where a signal may be warranted, but it is not desirable because, the highway is meant for moving people and goods, right? Whereas a signal, it exists, like Mr. Wasson says, and I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but the signal exists to give the minor street, the cross street, a chance to enter the bigger street. And that's not always desirable when the overall desire is the major street should not be stopped, right? So, at a half-mile location like this, that might be the case, right? Probably, if you ask me, that would be the case. So, if we're going to look into this further, Mr. Chairman, I'd be interested in looking at, so we've got this on the screen right now, but what's the bigger picture as far as what's the internal circulation? Are there other ways to, Meridian or Linder or Ustick besides Venable? What are the internal circulation routes, that sort of thing, before we would recommend, prioritizing a signal here. So, to some extent, it seems like, the person that wrote in sees a need, but the bigger picture, perhaps there's not quite as much need as might be perceived.
I do not disagree with you.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Wasson.
I can go back and for next meeting, I can pull the warrant book and find out which warrants Venable Ustick met and where it is on our projection list for installation of a signal, if it is even on a list. Because like Commissioner Lancaster said, just because it makes a list doesn't mean it's going anywhere. And I think his example is really pretty good with the state because, for example, Eagle Road, that should be a limited access highway. And right now it's got almost as many driveways as Carter's got little white pills. And I think that if they were to do it all over again, they might limit a little bit more of the access to better manage speeds and the accident rate on that street.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
I will say in that little dirt lot there that there's a 54 unit multifamily complex getting planted there. Hopefully starting in April, because that's when I have guys scheduled to get in there and start digging. So anyways, just a heads up on that. So look forward to that.
The man that's got the shovel. Okay.
Insider information right there.
Mr. Chair. Hi.
Yes, ma'am.
We talked about traffic lights and we talked about roundabouts. Do we not do speed reductions, like taking the speed limit down? Because most people, I feel like, only speed 5 to 10 over. So if you were to limit the speed limit, would that bring down accident rates or no?
Who would like to take that one?
John Wasson, Ada County Highway District. Commissioner Miller, thanks for the question. Our experience, both here and from what I've read nationally, is drivers tend to drive the speed at which they feel comfortable. And the numbers on the piece of tin don't mean a whole lot until the police officer gets behind you and say, didn't you see the speed limit of 35 and why are you going 82 in a 35 zone? So what we use typically is we start looking at what that 85th percentile is. And the 85th percentile is the speed at which 85% of drivers are driving at or below. And it's also called that reasonable person speed. So under normal conditions, you would see people driving on U-stick in the 35 to 40 mile an hour range. You wouldn't see a whole lot of people doing 110, and you wouldn't see a whole lot of people doing 12. The problem with posting the speed limit low because we know everybody's going to speed means we've made everybody violators already because people aren't going to respect a 15 mile an hour speed limit on the street. They're going to drive at 20, 25, or 30, what they feel like. And there's a little piece of code somewhere in state code that calls and says highway districts are, it's either supposed to or shall, I forget which, conduct speed studies every X number of years on certain roads, primarily arterials and major collectors. And if we were to go in and, let's say we were to go in and do the speed study and we found the 85th percentile on U-stick Road to be 40 miles an hour. And we posted it at 25 because we know everybody's going to speed. Well, Commissioner Lancaster's a smart young man. And I can say that because he's younger than I am. He's a smart young man, and he knows that when he gets cited for driving 40 miles an hour in a artificially low 25 mile an hour zone, he's going to fight that ticket and he's going to win that all day long because we have a speed study that we looked at, we evaluated it, and then we said, don't worry about it. We're just going to post it way low. And so we usually start off at the 85th. Now, there are exceptions. We haven't done this quite as much, but when I first started with the highway district, we also did roadside design stuff. So you would look at the side of the road and say, okay, we've got an open ditch, we've got a canal, we've got a 40-foot power pole that runs within 18 inches of the roadway. And those are reasons to justify scaling the speed limit down by 5 or 10 miles an hour as a crash reduction method. Did I answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. Little short master's degree study in traffic engineering or speed studying or both. Your comment a while ago about people that do 80-something when there's no traffic reminds me of a year or so ago when I was riding with the PD and we were on Eustic between, who was it? Anyway, no cars, just us and that 69-mile-an-hour motorcycle coming at us. It might as well have had a blinking light on top of him saying, "Stop me." We did. Okay. I wanted to step to item 2 from Mr. Agaios, maybe. I'm not sure the correct pronunciation. Excuse me if I'm not correct. But he made a comment about Black Cat. And Black Cat, which I cross every time I get in the car, either going across it or north on it or south on it, is a work in progress. That doesn't mean anything's happening today or tomorrow, but it is planned to go to 5 lanes at some point, to be a double lane roundabout at Black Cat and Macmillan, to have a new intersection built at Eustic and Black Cat starting this month, and all other kinds of work. His points he makes are not incorrect, but it's nothing that we, I think, as a commission can really look at, talk about, or try to change as long as it's in the state of development that it's in. He mentions a ped bike crossing at the canal between Macmillan and Eustic, which I use. He is correct. It is not marked as a ped crossing, but it's probably safer appearing dangerous than it is if you thought you were in that force field that the white lines create. You have to wait and time the traffic, which platoons because of the stop signs or lights on each end a mile away, and it works. There's not a lot of volume across that ped path. There's more all the time, but I'm sure that's on ACHD's radar. So being my neighborhood, I wanted to comment on that one. Ms. Hill, let's talk about young Miss McSherry, the 11-year-old young lady that wrote the mayor about some problems that she was aware of when they formerly lived in Meridian. She says they moved to Boise, but she wanted to bring up Chateau Drive and the park. And I communicated with Mr. Wasson during the past week, and he said that he might have some information for us about this young lady's comments and what he deals in every day. Do you, sir?
Mr. Chair, I do.
Good.
So I think that she is talking about a crossing at Todd Way.
She didn't specifically say at the intersection of, which made it a little tricky to figure out.
Correct, but Todd leads right into the parking lot of that park. And Todd is actually classified as a collector as his chateau. Now, we have done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 speed studies in the past 10 years or so on Chateau looking at traffic calming. And the only one that really has made the criteria was the one requested by a Caleb Hood,
Our Caleb Hood?
our Caleb Hood. And it met the speed criteria, but because he was not asking for traffic calming, he was just asking for the data. It didn't go any further.
And when, do you have the date?
Of course I have the date, sir. Started off 4/13/16.
16.
Yes, sir, 16.
Okay.
The last one we did was 7/15/24. And what we found was the volume on Chateau from Linder to 10 Mile. And this study was done that it met the ADT to be eligible, but it failed the speed and the volume criteria for traffic calming. Part of the problem that makes it a little difficult for traffic calming this street is to the west, there's no front-on housing. And when you have no front-on housing, that by design means you have no driveways. And that helps lead to an increase in the speeds because people don't have to watch for vehicles pulling in or out of a driveway. So we do see speeds out there go a little bit higher. We have looked at always stop at Chateau and Todd, and it hasn't met the criteria for it. If we were to put a crossing, it would take a project to do that, to put a crosswalk in at that location. Based upon the volumes out there, it is likely that just a striped crosswalk, level 1 crosswalk would be sufficient. But this is like so many of the other locations we get where we get asked, just stripe a crosswalk. That's easy. It's just $10 worth of paint and a sign that says there's a crosswalk here. Unfortunately, that's not the case. When you start either installing a new crosswalk or fixing an older crosswalk, that's when the Americans with Disabilities Act starts coming into play, and you have to make it ADA compliant. So that means you have to go in there, and on the north side, you have to make curb cuts, build a ramp, make it ADA compliant, put in the tactile pads, all that kind of stuff. And you have to do this, you have to fix the south side too, to make it do the same thing. And you also have to look at how much usage do you have? Because this is not like the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. We have to have a certain amount of pedestrians in an hour to be able to justify the installation of a crosswalk. And generally that's 15 to 20. And so if somebody were to say, if you come out here on any given day, at any time, or if you come out here Thursday at 4 o'clock, you're gonna see buku pedestrians. We'll come out there at Thursday at 4 o'clock. But what we don't want to see is, you and 47 of your friends get together and do a conga line across the street.
Do you have any answer to her comment about lack of visibility? Do you think she's talking about the southwest corner of Todd and Chateau? I drove over there and looked. I can't say it's blocked, but I don't know whether you had a chance to look at it or not.
I don't live very far from there, Mr. Chair. And so I've been there numerous times, and we get this a lot, that it's a blind corner. You can't see. And typically the two fixes that we observe need to be taken care of is driver needs to slow down because at 25 miles an hour, this is not a blind corner. At 72 miles an hour, it's definitely a blind corner, but at 25, it's not. But the other thing, and it's just as important, the pedestrian has to look both ways before they get out and step out into traffic. And part of that is societal, and part of that is, as a parent, we have to educate our little kids, just like our mothers and grandmothers told us. Johnny, look both ways before you walk into the street.
Commissioners, comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Lancaster.
so when you hang around this commission long enough, you learn where all the cut throughs are in town. And Miss Hill, if you can zoom out, this is one of them. So, you know, you can make a fairly straight line between 10 Mile and Linder on Chateau. So, you know, this is acting like a collector. It's acting like a small arterial where, you know, some of the traffic that Mr. Wasson's measuring is probably cut through traffic, which probably contributes to some of, you know, any speed that's observed and whatnot. So, you know, if Mr. Hood were here, he'd say, well, we don't allow roads to be built like this anymore because of this reason, right? So it's part of, you know, partly design. So that, you know, there's probably not a magic solution here. It's kind of built into the infrastructure.
Mr. Chair, John Wasson, ACHD.
Sure.
I think that when we have the Linder Road project and we start ripping up a mile of Linder Road, which I just can't wait to have happen, it is very likely that we will go into this neighborhood and probably install some temporary all-way stop signs to muddle things up for drivers, because with the all-way stop, it's very easy for the police to assist in compliance for people wanting to cut through and try to go just a little bit faster and make not quite the stops that they would want to make. And so what we may end up doing is going in there as an example and making Chateau and Monaco an all-way stop, Chateau and Astaire an all-way stop, Chateau and Maxey an all-way stop, Chateau and I can't read what it is. It's the street just west of Sandalwood. Make the, you know, throw 4 or 5 all-way stops in there just to muck things up and make it less convenient for people to want to cut through there, as opposed to staying on U-stick and just going around the mile.
Your point being that if you're working over on Linder, you would think that Chateau would turn into even more of a cut through because of the getaway from the construction, and therefore you wouldn't want them to flow that way if you could help it, and this 4-way stops would help it.
I would bet both Commissioner Lancaster's and mine last dollar on it. You still do have that dollar bill in your wallet.
Yeah, I think I'm on that last one right now. Yeah.
But yes, sir, we do this in a number of locations when we have a project and we have a street like Chateau, which, as Commissioner Lancaster said, sets itself up fairly well for cut-through traffic.
Anyone else? Ms. Hill, do you have enough to work with the mayor's office to give an additional response to Ms. McSherry?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have a phone number, so I might have to write a letter, but I can work with the mayor's office to see how we want to proceed with that.
I would like, I would guess that her parents were involved in the letter being written. So I'd like for you to do it in such a way that they hear whatever kind of answer you send. Okay.
Mr. Chair, John Wasson, two
Yes, sir.
other things, sir. I have not been out there this week, but looking at the street view, there's one luminaire on the southwest corner of Todd and Chateau, and it looks like it's been eaten by the plant monster. It's fairly well obstructed by vegetation. And so that may be something, the city, vegetation folks want to go out and look at. And if the commission so directs, ACHD can evaluate for a pedestrian crossing at Todd. Now is probably not the best time to do that. I would recommend we look at it in the spring, but if the commission would like us to, we can certainly do that.
I would personally be surprised you would get the volumes you would need in order to justify it. Commissioners, any other thoughts on it? Okay. Ms. Hill, you have a late addition to the staff communications that I did not see when it came out today, but would you like to go into that now?
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, Heather Hill, I sent out an email earlier this afternoon about the draft residential traffic calming policies that ACHD has asked for partner input on. So I did send that on to you. I've also provided hard copies at your desk to look through. I understand that it may be a lot to review and digest, so we don't have to have a full discussion this afternoon if you need some time. Really, I'm not looking for a motion for any of this since it wasn't on the agenda. It's more of just a discussion. I think ACHD's one pager that highlights some of the changes kind of represents it well. There's a clean version and then a strike through version. So as chair knows, I was out too, so I was just kind of catching up on reading all these today as well. I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at it for discussion, and I also did prep John Wasson over here that I would be bringing this up to if there was additional questions. Really, it looks like some of the key elements of the policy revisions they're just really looking to streamline and simplify it. It was a 5-page policy previously, and now it's 2. They looked at different speed and volume thresholds, simplified some of the language. And so we can do this a couple different ways. I can open it up to just standard conversation, or I can get us started with a question that I had, because really it's looking to just gather feedback and then get back to Justin Lucas at ACHD with any comments, concerns, questions we have. So I can start with at least one that Caleb, myself, and Brian talked about this morning, if you want to kick it off that way.
What kind of time frame are we under on this?
So in the email, I think it says that ACHD is seeking feedback by November 22nd from us. And so they're looking to take it before their commission for adoption on December 11th, which is why it got shoved into staff communications. I can reach out and see if we could ask for additional time. But I did in the email say, if you want time to look at this when you go home or at a later date, I think I said the end of day on Tuesday, November 12th, if you want to provide any written comments to me in a reply all manner, because really it's not we're not making a formal recommendation. It's just thoughts, concerns, anything of that nature.
Mr. Wasson, is there maybe striking score is not the correct term, but something showing what the changes are?
So it's one of your handouts up there.
Which one of the code
There's a-
sheets?
So there's a clean version.
Bingo,
and
thank
then-
you.
Yeah.
That's pretty quick. Like I say, I hadn't had a chance to look at this. Okay, all right, so we've got that. We've got a time frame. let's let you go ahead and raise your question that
Okay.
staff came up with earlier today to give the commission members a little more time to think about what they would like to have to say about this, and we'll pick up from there.
Okay, so the first is on the one page, the clean version, under 5104.2.1. It says that residential streets greater than 750 feet in length with a posted speed limit of 30 mile per hour or less and classified as a local or collector street. We were curious how this would be handled in a situation where it's unless otherwise posted for speed limits. And I don't want to put John on the spot necessarily either, but if he happens to know, that was just a question that came up.
Ask the last part again for my benefit.
So in the link, the
I
draft,
get the reference, but the question is,
just that it says with a posted speed limit. So if it's in a residential neighborhood where the speed limit is not posted and it's assumed to be unless otherwise posted, because I think in the city of Meridian, it's 25 miles per hour or as otherwise posted. So how would ACHD handle that situation?
Ms. Hill,
before Mr. Watson answers, I'll throw in a penny's worth. I was very surprised to find in Meridian, contrary to the smaller town I came from here, that when you turn into neighborhoods, you more often than not find a 25 mile an hour speed limit sign right there. I'm used to towns that post at the city limits. The speed limit in this town is 25 miles an hour unless posted otherwise. And right after that is a 45 mile an hour speed limit sign because you're still on the highway. But I understand your question. I'll ask Mr. Watson to answer it, but I'd like a nickel for every 25 mile an hour speed limit sign Meridian's got out there.
Ms. Hill, Mr. Chair, John Wasson, ACHD. We're going to use a modicum of common sense on that. All of the residential streets, subdivision streets, are not posted, and they never will be. But when you enter a subdivision, you see that 25 mile an hour speed limit sign. That is the posted speed limit and the applicable speed limit until you pass another speed limit sign, either confirming it's still 25 or raising the speed limit. So, for example, if you're on Chateau, well, you're going to see a speed limit sign at 10 mile and off of Linder Road. And you may see one somewhere around a stair. I just remember that on that one, but it's 25 through the entirety, with the exception of the school zone. And then at the end of the school zone, there's going to be a sign that says, leaving school zone speed limit 25 miles an hour. So we're going to look at that and say, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, that was just one thing that we wanted to see how, I guess, ACHD would take a stance with that since it says specifically 30 miles per hour or less. So we weren't sure why it did, what the eligibility factor was there. Another that came up, and it was more of just a comment. It's on under 5104.2.3 for peak hour traffic and speed thresholds. It was more of just a comment. It shows that under sub 2, it's that 15% of vehicles are traveling at or exceeding 28 miles per hour as a speed threshold, which seems low for us, being that the standard speed limit is 25 miles per hour unless otherwise posted. Whereas I believe in Boise, it's 20 miles per hour. And so I think that was just something that we were like, oh, that seems kind of low for here. What impact would that have on ACHD?
That is probably a question best addressed to Deputy Director Justin.
Thank you. Those were a couple of our comments just for now. Obviously, like staff, I'll review this more as well and put together comments for ACHD staff. But I appreciate Mr. Wasson providing at least some explanation for now on where the speed limits are fixed, so.
Mr. Lancaster.
Mr. Chairman,
Well, I could even ask. Thank
Yeah.
you.
and Ms. Hill, well, I guess this was kind of asked before, but maybe I'm just slow and need clarification, but what's the ask of us? Is this, so right now this is so let me say it this way. The way I'm understanding this is a draft policy change by ACHD, and they'll be voting on it in December. So we have the chance to give input on it before the vote. Is that?
That is correct, Commissioner Lancaster.
But they are asking for comments by November something,
22nd, which wouldn't allow
which will
us-
be before our next official meeting.
Yeah, which is inconvenient.
Good word.
I'm happy to reach out to Deputy Director Justin Lucas and ask if there could be an extension, if the commission would like to entertain and have a more formal discussion about this. In the meantime, that's why I did send out the email as well to be like, if there is a lot of comments, feedback, commentary, we can do it in a different process, which isn't ideal, I understand.
What date is our December meeting?
Monday, December 2nd, I believe.
Yeah.
And their vote is the 11th?
Yes.
So that is 9 days prior to their vote. I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I wouldn't think a request for an extension because of our timing would be out of order.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I guess first and foremost, it would be helpful if we could provide more formal comments in December at our December meeting, if that request can be made.
Do you wish, if we do that, ask for an extension because of our calendar, do you also want to open up an ability for the commissioners to absorb all of this and comment back to Ms. Hill before then, before the December meeting? Still considering the opportunity to get an official response back post our December 2nd meeting.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question?
Please, Mr. Lewis.
So, so our review and comment on this needs to go through city council before it goes to ECHD. Is that correct or not correct?
Mrs. Hill is nodding no.
Commissioner Lewis, Heather Hill, not that I'm aware of, this isn't something that's typically gone before council for any recommendation. This is really just in this body to review and provide input, and I'm presenting this before you just to, as a partner, to get input and comments back. So it's nothing that I'm aware of that has to go to council, and I had asked that earlier, but of course can make sure of that. But there's no formal recommendations coming because this is a policy for ACHD that encompasses more than just the city of Meridian.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Leclerc, are you?
Yeah. Well, just as we're throwing ideas on the floor, the neighborhood survey, just some feedback. Seems like there should be some kind of a time frame. I mean, if the survey starts and several years go by and then the 60th percentile household says, okay, it's going to be kind of a surprise to everybody that this has come back to life when they thought it was over. Well, it seems like there should be some kind of a maybe a 1 year or maybe even year 90-day window to gather that survey response. I don't know if that's been considered or not, if this was just a effort to streamline and sounded good. That it would concern me that that there should be some kind of a expectation that this survey will begin and end rather than just be forever.
I think that's the type of question that I would be looking for if we're going to submit questions to staff before our next formal meeting. I don't know that we won't, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, if we would like to just study all this and then come back in December and hold a possibly really, really long meeting talking about details such as that while we work our way through to see what kind of recommendations we want to make. I personally lean toward asking members to work it up, submit any questions, comments, concerns, confusion to staff before the December meeting, give staff a chance to ask further questions of ACHD or to respond to members saying not pertinent because, or good one, we're putting that on the list, as the case may be. Mr. Lancaster.
So, Mr. Chairman, I concur, but I do have a couple questions I'd like to ask today still, if I may.
Please.
And they're of Mr. Wasson. So, Mr. Wasson, if these changes are adopted as written, do you expect them to increase, decrease, or no change to the amount of traffic calming that ACHD does?
Commissioner Lancaster, Mr. Chair, I think it will result in an increase of traffic calming requests because when this goes to the press, it'll say ACHD's changed its policy. I don't know how many more will be successful or not because in addition to meeting the criteria, either speed or volume, then they have to get the petition together and get support from the neighborhood. In response to Commissioner Leclerc's last question, currently when we send the petition out to the responsible party, we give them 90 days to get the petition back, and we will give them an automatic 30-day and an occasional 60-day extension depending on a lot of different things. But the 30-day is pretty much, yay, go forward and do good things. But after that, the commission likes to see fresh data, and after a year, the data is no longer fresh.
Mr. Lancaster, you had another one?
I do, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Wasson, this is how is stuff paid for question. So we work on our city priority list annually. And, you know, those are typically the bigger, more expensive projects, right? So with regard to traffic calming, is that paid for out of the same pot of money? And if so, you know, would more traffic calming installations lead to, you know, less funding for the integrated 5-year work plan projects, or are they different pots of money, or how does that all work?
Commissioner Lancaster, Mr. Chair, I don't know the answer to that question because I deal with two pots of money. I have two checking accounts. When one of them's dry, I don't write checks out of them. I do know that this past year, the commission approved somewhere in the vicinity of $475,000 for traffic calming efforts, which is an increase of about $460,000 higher than I've ever seen us spend on traffic calming in any other year in the 23 years that I've been with the district. So it was a big reach, and we ended up installing about 77 or 80 speed cushions in 13 different locations. Some of them were new installs, some of them were repairs, and one of them was a new install, a removal, and another new install because somebody changed our pavement markings.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
So Mr. Wasson, that leads to so that makes me curious now. So if you got that big an increase in budget, how much of that did you spend?
Commissioner Lancaster, Mr. Chair, I spent every penny of it. What we did was we got a couple of bids from pavement companies, and we went with the low bid, which turned out to be an extraordinarily good company. And the commission took that bid, reviewed it because it was a formal bid based upon the amount. They reviewed it and they approved the payment of that entire invoice.
Mr. Wasson, a question. Did the proposed change come out of your shop?
Some of, Mr. Chair, some of the changes did, but a lot of them came from Deputy Director Lucas and the commission.
Thank you. Commissioners, what are your desires? What kind of direction would you like to give staff regarding this item? Mr. Leclerc, saw you first.
I like the idea of having another shot at this on the 2nd of December. And I think we should make that request of the ACHD. I mean, these traffic calming issues, I know they are the lead, but we get a lot of comments about them here in our world. And
What keeps us in business?
I guess, but it would be good to have a little more thorough input into this. I don't know if it'll be even substantial differences will come out of it, but we would like to have that time to look at it. I think it would be important to us and what we do for the city of Meridian.
Anyone have a problem with Mr. Leclerc's suggestion that we ask staff to request an extension of their comment time? There you go. There's one. What do you want to do, if anything, regarding having a chance to comment to staff prior to the 2nd? You certainly don't have to. I'm sorry?
So I don't have a problem with that either.
Well, Mr. Chairman, what makes me curious is if we have, seems like this is a streamlining. The intentions are good, but this is what people will go off of, and I think some more detail and clarity might be good, like what the typical timeline is. I mean, there's best practices, but this is a regulation of the commission, so there's always a decision. Do you want how you do things every step of the way in your regulations, or do you just want to give direction and then have practices that work good? So so I would hope the commission would think about that and maybe clarify what the timeline is for the survey, what there's extensions, why would there be extensions, and there may be other variants about the standards here, as well as the implementation of these devices, that those details might be good to have in their rules. Not tell them how to do that. I mean, they're their rules, but it might be something we think would be valuable is to have some more detail for the public to see when they look at the proposal, know what to expect. So that sort of broadens my first question into everything, and see if that review would cause some extra time to be taken anyway, and would then, they could take another look at that at their meeting on the 22nd, and then maybe decide to leave it open. So if there's, if they think it's perfect the way it is, then we'll spend our time on something else. But I think it's a draft, and it's well worth discussing some of these details. So I hope they'll extend it. That's my second comment, I guess, is that they would look at more of the specifics of each of these stages of qualification, survey, and implementation. Okay.
Other thoughts, comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lewis?
So is our task to review these draft changes individually prior to our next meeting, and then send in our comments prior to the meeting so that we can talk about them intelligently at our next meeting, and to kind of speed up the process? Is that where we're heading?
It just strikes me that giving staff a heads up ahead of time, if you're of a mind to do that, would give them a chance to look into it and be prepared better at our December 2nd meeting to say that doesn't apply because, or that's a really good one, we missed that, or that kind of thing. Just so, I know it's tough to do homework on these things, but I just think this is big enough that to say we're not going to pick it up and look at it until we walk back in here in a month is probably a little kind of not really the best way to do it.
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, if I may, I would say that it'd be best for me to reach out to ACHD first to just understand their timeline. Since, I'm just receiving this email, I feel like I know probably just as much as you do for their timeline. I'm just reading it from the email. So just to understand their November 22nd deadline for comments, I don't know what it looks like on their schedule and getting it before their commission to just make sure that we could even meet to discuss it and provide them with any comments on December 2nd. So I think it would be wise to maybe tentatively plan for just providing comments to me by, I think I said next week, so that I can engage with ACHD and find out if they're willing to extend the deadline for us, if they'd have enough time to digest that. I just don't want to assume at this point that it would all work out and they would accept our comments late and they'd be able to include it in whatever packet they have to put together for their commission meeting.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Other comments, questions? Okay. Thank you. Mr. Watson, I want to thank you for starring in today's meeting with all the information you brought us, as always. I guess one question I've got going back to Chinden by the Rock Harbor Church. The original questions came from citizens, not from to my understanding, not from the church. I understand ACHD and ITD wishing to try to get the church to weigh in on what they think about any of it, or what they might be willing to do, or what they might want. But we still have more than one comment from citizens talking about the real or perceived problems there. So I don't want to get us hung up on, we hadn't heard from the church, therefore it's dead. So we'll, in some fashion,
To be continued.
keep it in the loop. And I have, because I haven't been allowed to drive for the last month, I hadn't had an opportunity to go over there and park on a Sunday morning and see what's going on, but I will soon. You've got a list of 2, 4, 6 future meeting topics you can take a look at. Next meeting, official meeting, will be December 2nd at 3:30. Anything else from anyone? Tomorrow is election day. If you haven't voted, I would encourage you to do so. If you have an absentee ballot you haven't mailed, don't. Take it to your precinct. I understand you can't get to the post, get through the post office and to the appropriate office by tomorrow, and we're not like Washington. They've got to be in by tomorrow at whatever time the polls close, or they will not be counted. With that said, the chair would accept a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, I move to adjourn.
Mr. Lancaster, motion. Second by Mr. Leclerc. You got beat. Mr. Hopkins. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Ms. Miller?